Welcome back. I'm Andy, and this started as the kind of work story I thought would end with me quietly moving on. I was 27 when all of this happened, and I had spent 5 years at the same logistics company. On paper, I was doing well enough. I had a steady paycheck, a decent apartment, and the kind of routine that makes you feel like life is finally settling into place. I was the guy who showed up early, stayed late, and answered messages after hours because I thought that was what being dependable looked like. My job title was analyst, but in practice I was the person everybody leaned on when things got messy. If a client was upset, they sent them to me. If a report needed fixing, I fixed it. If somebody needed coverage for a shift, I covered it. If a deadline was impossible, I somehow made it possible. I told myself that this was how you build trust. I told myself that if I kept doing the right thing, somebody would notice. The people around me made that easier to believe. Steve, my manager, had a way of talking that made everything sound encouraging even when it was not. Anna from accounts always acted like my inbox was her emergency line. Ronnie from operations treated my desk like a help counter. And Bella, who would later become the center of everything, was someone I had already trained once before. She was nice enough, polite, and always on time, but she was also the kind of employee who needed a lot of hand-holding. I never had a problem helping people. I only had a problem when helping people became the whole job. For years, I ignored that feeling. I kept telling myself that hard work would pay off eventually. I kept telling myself that loyalty meant something. And for a while, I really believed it did. Then the senior operations manager position opened up, and I thought all of that effort was finally about to matter. That role was basically my job, except with actual authority and a salary that would have changed my life. Steve pulled me aside as soon as the posting went live and told me I should absolutely apply. He said I was exactly what they wanted. He helped me prep. We did mock interviews. He told me what the executives liked to hear. I spent 2 full weeks making sure every answer was polished, every example was strong, and every detail showed that I knew the department inside and out. The interviews went well, too well if I'm being honest. I met with directors, then the vice president, and every conversation felt like I had done enough. At the end of the final interview, the VP shook my hand and said, "I think you know how this is going to go." I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in years. I really thought I had made it. Then they hired Bella. I remember staring at the email and rereading it like the words might change if I looked long enough. Bella had only been there 14 months. I knew that because I had trained her myself. I had spent 2 weeks showing her the systems, the client accounts, the reporting process, and all the little things nobody wrote down anywhere. She was fine. That was the best way I could describe her. Fine, not exceptional, not a standout, just fine. Steve called me into his office on a Friday afternoon, and I knew before he said a word that something was wrong. He had that careful face people use when they want to soften a blow they already know will land hard. He told me they had decided to go with Bella. I sat there in silence, waiting for the explanation to become reasonable. It never did. He said it came down to leadership experience. He said Bella had more direct management background. He said the executives felt she was the better fit. I remember thinking very clearly that this had to be some kind of mistake. The woman who used to ask me how to send a basic client email had more leadership experience than I did. The person I had trained was now my boss. That was the story they wanted me to accept. I did not explode. I did not yell. I just nodded, walked back to my desk, and sat there for a long time staring at my screen without seeing anything. That was the moment the first crack formed, not because I lost the promotion, because I realized they had already decided what I was worth. That weekend, I updated my resume. I started looking at job boards. I told myself I would keep my head down, do my actual job, and leave when I found something better. No drama. No scene, just a clean exit. But the company was not done with me yet. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The next morning, Steve came to my desk before I had even fully logged in. That alone told me this was not going to be a normal conversation. He asked if I had a minute, and then he led me into a conference room and shut the door. He told me Bella was starting the new role on Monday and needed to get up to speed quickly. Then he said the words that changed everything. He wanted me to train her. Not because I was qualified for the role, not because I had been chosen for it, because I knew the work. I asked him to repeat it just to make sure I had heard him correctly. He smiled that fake manager smile and said it again like this was a perfectly reasonable request. Just a few weeks, he said. Show her the advanced systems. Introduce her to the key clients. Walk her through the reporting process. I could feel my face getting hot, but I kept my voice steady. I told him no. The room went very still. He looked confused first, then annoyed, then offended like I had broken some invisible office rule. He said I was being difficult. He said we were all supposed to support each other. He said refusing would hurt my future there. That was when I understood something important. They were not asking for help. They were asking for obedience. I told him if I was not qualified to do the job, then I was not qualified to train someone else to do it. I told him to find somebody else. He did not like that answer. He said this was exactly the kind of attitude that made leadership nervous. He said I was proving their concerns right, and there it was. The real reason, not leadership experience, not skill, attitude, translation. I had stopped smiling while being used. I stood up, told him I did my job, met my deadlines, and handled my clients, but I was not training the person who had taken my promotion. Then I walked out. I thought that would be the end of it. It was not. An hour later, I got a calendar invite for a meeting about team collaboration. The attendees were me, Steve, and Brenda from HR. I knew exactly what that meant. The company was about to make my refusal into a problem. That afternoon, I walked into HR and found Brenda waiting with Steve. Todd, one of my coworkers, was near the coffee machine pretending not to listen. Todd was a good guy, just not the sharpest tool in the shed, and he had the kind of face that made it impossible for him to hide curiosity. Brenda started with the usual corporate tone. She said she understood I was disappointed. She said refusing to support a colleague was not acceptable. Steve added that I was being unprofessional. He said I needed to think about the team. I asked them if it was professional to promote someone I had trained and then expect me to hand over everything I knew. Nobody answered that. Brenda pulled out a printed copy of my job description and pointed out the parts about knowledge transfer and team development. I told her to write me up if they wanted to, but I still was not doing it. The room went quiet after that. Steve looked furious. Brenda looked like she had already decided I was the problem. They told me refusing management direction could lead to corrective action. I said, do what you need to do. When I left that room, I knew the temperature in the office had changed. People stopped talking when I walked by. Anna started sending Bella the requests she used to send me. Ronnie suddenly had to solve his own problems. Bella kept coming to my desk with questions, and every time I told her to ask Steve. She looked confused, then frustrated, then embarrassed. And honestly, I did feel a little guilty. Not because I was wrong, but because I knew she had not created this mess. She had just benefited from it. That is a hard thing to sit with when you are angry. You do not want to punish the person standing in front of you. You want to punish the system that put them there. But the system was already punishing me. By Friday, the cracks were showing everywhere. Bella missed deadlines. Reports went out wrong. A presentation to executives went badly enough that I could hear the tension from my desk. Steve kept trying to corner me in the break room, telling me I needed to be a team player. I kept telling him I was doing my job, nothing more, nothing less. Then I got a call from a recruiter. For the first time in days, I felt something other than anger. The company was better. The pay was better. The role had actual growth. I scheduled an interview for the following week and told myself I just had to survive a little longer. Then Monday came and they called me into a performance meeting. The room had 4 people in it: Steve, Brenda, another HR rep named Colleen, and me. They had folders, notes, and that same careful look people wear when they are about to tell you your life is about to get harder. Colleen said they had concerns about my attitude, my cooperation, and my refusal to participate in required team activities. Steve said colleagues had reported negative energy. Brenda said I was being resistant. I remember looking at them and thinking how absurd it was that the people who had spent years benefiting from my work were now describing me like I was a problem employee because I had finally said no. They told me I was being placed on a 60-day performance improvement plan. That was the moment I stopped feeling afraid. I had heard enough about these plans to know what they really were: a paper trail, a way to make termination look clean, a way to say they had given me a chance while quietly setting me up to fail. So I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. My resignation. Steve stared at it like it had insulted him personally. Colleen looked stunned. Brenda looked irritated, which I found almost funny. Steve said I could not just leave, that I had active projects, that they needed transition time. I told him he should have thought about that before the performance plan. He said I was being unprofessional. I told him this was self-preservation. Then I walked back to my desk and packed my things while the entire office watched in silence. My coffee mug, my photos, my stapler, my badge. It took maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like moving through a dream. Anna would not meet my eyes. Ronnie looked uncomfortable. Bella was nowhere to be seen. Todd came over and asked if I was really leaving right then. I said yes. He nodded like that made sense, which somehow made me laugh for the first time in days. I dropped my badge on Steve's desk, logged out of my computer, and walked out of the building at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. That was the moment everything changed. The first few hours after I left felt unreal. I sat in my car for a while before driving home, just letting the silence settle around me. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Texts from coworkers, missed calls, a message from Todd that simply said, "Dude, that was wild." By the end of the week, the company was already struggling. The reports I had built were not as easy to run as everyone thought. The systems I had documented were apparently not as intuitive as they believed. The client contacts I had maintained were only reliable because I had maintained them. Once I was gone, everything started slipping. Anna told me Bella was drowning. Ronnie was making mistakes. Steve was trying to cover for both of them and failing. Clients were asking questions nobody could answer. Deadlines were missed. A major account got the wrong quarterly report. One client demanded a meeting after their shipment tracking went dark. I was not there to watch it in person, but I could picture it clearly enough. The frantic emails, the tense conference rooms, the growing realization that the person they had treated like a spare part had been holding the whole thing together. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. That conversation was almost worse than the job. She did not ask how I was. She did not ask why I left. She went straight to anger. My brother Zach had told her I quit. She called me irresponsible. She said jobs were hard to find. She said I had thrown away 5 years because I did not get my way. Zach, of course he was involved. Zach was 3 years older and had always been the favorite. He was the one our parents trusted, the one they praised, the one whose mistakes were called learning experiences while mine were treated like warnings. He got help with college. He got introductions. He got grace. I got lectures. When I told my parents that Bella had been promoted over me and that they had then asked me to train her, they acted like I was overreacting. My father told me I was being emotional. My mother told me I should apologize and try to get my job back. Then I learned Zach had been talking to people in the industry about me. At first, I thought my parents were just guessing. Then I got an email chain that proved it. Zach had been in contact with someone at my old company, asking about my performance, asking whether there were concerns, and then repeating whatever they told him as if it were family concern rather than sabotage. I felt sick reading it, not just because he was talking about me, because he was helping them build a story. I called a lawyer named Greg, and he looked at the emails and told me the company had probably crossed several legal lines. He said Zach's involvement made it worse. He said it looked coordinated. That was the beginning of the legal fight, and then the job hunt got ugly. I had interviews lined up. Some went well, some seemed promising. But every time a reference check happened, something changed. Suddenly, there were concerns about my attitude, my professionalism, my reliability. I started getting the same polite rejection over and over, and it did not take long to understand why. My old company was poisoning every lead they could reach. Greg told me that was illegal. He told me to save everything. Then another email arrived, and this one was worse. It showed my company and Zach actively discussing how to protect their story, how to document things retroactively, and how to warn other employers about me. That was the moment the case stopped being just about one bad manager and one bad promotion. It became about a system. Greg found other former employees. April, James, both had similar stories. Both had been pushed out after speaking up. Both had trouble finding work afterward because the company had quietly blacklisted them. When more documents came out, we found a list of employees marked as do not rehire with notes about who to warn and who to avoid. My name was on it, so were theirs. I think what hurt most was not what they did, it was what it meant. It meant all those years of effort had never been seen as loyalty. They had seen me as useful, replaceable but useful. And the second I stopped being convenient, they were willing to destroy me. My family did the same thing. They did not protect me. They protected the version of events that made them comfortable. That is a strange kind of grief. It does not always look like crying. Sometimes it looks like sitting at your kitchen table at midnight, reading emails that prove your own brother helped bury your career. Sometimes it looks like realizing your parents care more about appearances than truth. Sometimes it looks like understanding that the people who taught you to be loyal never intended to be loyal back. I had to learn that I was allowed to leave. I was allowed to say no. I was allowed to protect myself even if other people called it selfish. That was not easy for me. For most of my life, I had been the person who tried to keep the peace, the one who absorbed the stress, the one who made things easier for everyone else. I thought that made me good. In some ways it did, but it also made me easy to use. If I could go back, I would still refuse to train Bella. I would still walk out rather than let them turn my replacement into my responsibility. The only thing I would do differently is trust my instincts sooner. The warning signs were there. The favoritism, the vague praise, the way they always needed me until they needed me too much. Eventually, the case went public. The company tried to settle first, then they tried to minimize, then they tried to blame a few individuals and pretend the rest was misunderstanding. It did not work. Discovery exposed the whole network, the emails, the blacklist, the coordination with other companies, the way they had been sharing employee information like it was normal. The trial was long, exhausting and deeply satisfying in a way I did not expect. Greg was relentless. April and James testified. The emails were read into the record. Zach had to sit there and answer questions about why he had been contacting my employer before I was even rejected for the promotion. He had no good answers. The jury ruled in our favor. The damages were significant, but the bigger impact was public. The story spread. The company's reputation collapsed. Executives resigned. Steve lost his job. Zach lost his. My parents never apologized. They just doubled down and told anyone who would listen that I had ruined the family. I did not talk to them after that. I want to give you an update because a lot has changed. I am working for much better company now. The pay is better, but more importantly, the culture is different. People there do not confuse exploitation with teamwork. If I say something is not my job, they do not treat it like a personal insult. They treat it like a boundary. The lawsuit is over and the money helped me rebuild, but that was never the part that mattered most. What mattered was finally seeing the truth written down in a way nobody could argue with. What mattered was knowing I was not crazy, not lazy, and not difficult for wanting basic respect. A few former employees reached out after everything came out. Some thanked me. Some said the case helped them understand what had happened to them. April and James used part of their settlement to start a consulting firm. They asked if I wanted in, but I passed. I needed distance from all of it for a while. As for my family, nothing has really changed there. Zach is gone from the industry. My parents still act like I am the one who caused the damage. Maybe that is easier for them. I do not know. I stopped trying to fix what they refuse to see. Todd still messages me sometimes. He is still exactly the same, which is almost comforting. He once asked if I was still mad at everyone, and I told him I was mostly just at peace. That is the closest thing to a happy ending I can give you. So I have to ask you, if your company passed you over, then demanded you train the person who replaced you, would you have done it anyway just to keep the peace? Because I still think about that moment, and I genuinely do not know if I made the right call. Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and if you want more stories like this, you already know what to do.